1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, testing. Yes. Give me a second. Okay, is this working? Yes, you can hear me, right? Okay. Welcome to everybody. We are very glad to have you here in this seminar. And we also are online too. So if you connect with us online, if you had any question, you can send it to us through YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are. And thank you, Patty, and thank you, Michelle, for helping us today. So we would like to have a prayer and ask God to be with us in here. And also, I would like in a moment you to introduce yourselves too, so we can know about what you are doing. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for allowing us to be here. We ask for your presence with us, and to bless this moment, and to bless and guide Michelle and Patty and what they are about to talk. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so leave you two guys, and
Okay.
you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
We're happy to see you all so much.
Yes.
Am I on? I turned it on, I thought.
It is on.
Yep, it's on. Can you all hear me? Turn it up.
While they're doing that, I'll go
Yeah,
ahead
go
and
ahead.
introduce myself.
Okay.
Patty and I are kindred spirits. We have a real passion and love for mental health. So
Okay, I don't know. I think you can all hear me because I'm a loud talker, even without this. So I'm Patty, and I have been in the psych mental health field for 35 years. It makes me sound so old, but it is true. I started when I was 10. No. So I was a registered nurse working on a psychiatric unit, got certified in mental health, psych nursing, and did that on the unit caring for patients for a little over 20 years. Went back to school, got a master's degree, and began teaching. So I'm an assistant clinical professor at right down the road here, Ashland University College of Nursing. So if you go down the road here and you see the pond with the nice fountain, that's where I teach. So I've been teaching psych mental health to nursing students now for about 16, 17 years. Still doing, I still go to the units with my students to see the patients, and so I kind of keep my hand in it that way. But that's kind of our backgrounds.
yes,
So,
and we work right across the street from each other.
yes, we're right across the street now, so now we can have lunch, which is a stress reliever, going out to lunch with someone you love, right?
Right.
So we're going to kind of break this up a little bit, but one thing we wanted to say is this isn't a formal thing. Just because we're sitting up here and you're sitting back there. We're sitting up here because we're being filmed. But you guys, we want to interact. Have questions. Stop us. Raise your hand if you need to. Want it to be informal and just a time that we can, share some things that you may already know. This might not be all new information to you. We're hoping that you get something new out of today. We've got some handouts and some fun things to do. But if you want to talk about that.
So we're going to talk quite a bit today about quite a few things, hopefully something you can take home and have in your toolbox. But I just want to kind of give out a disclaimer here that if you hear something that you're concerned about, maybe with yourself, we encourage you to seek your a provider, mental health, your primary care provider. Talk to somebody that can actually do some intense screening in case you do think that you have a mental health disorder or one of your family members do. So we want to just put that out there. Please seek help from a professional if there's something you're concerned about.
Yeah, we don't want you to think this takes the place of any, needed visits to your healthcare provider. So make sure that that happens. So I think the first thing we're going to do is give you a little course in statistics, or do you want to do the unpacking? Okay. We're going to actually, you saw that we're having a toolbox. So we have a lovely model that has agreed, Larry, to come up and to actual tools to maybe what they could mean as far as mental health. Okay, so what is our first one, Michelle?
So the first one is a level. We know how important a level is when you're building something. And you usually like it to be in balance, right? That little bubble kind of.
Correct? So maybe in our life we're having some overwhelming stress, we're having some anxiety, maybe depression. We need to make adjustments. That's what we're going to talk about today. What tools can we use to make adjustments in our life so that we can be maybe happier, physically healthy, mentally healthy? And we might say this more often today, but there is a saying that I love, and I tell my nursing students this all the time. There is no health without mental health. Do we all agree on that? Because so many people will focus on a physical disorder and not think about the rest. So we'll talk more about that. Okay.
Right. And so just to add to that, what Patty says is I do tell my patients that ignore their physical health, but they see me for their mental health. And I tell them, physically, your body needs to be in the best shape. It will affect your mental health if your body's in good physical health.
You can't really separate the two, physical and mental.
Right. So duct tape. Who has duct tape here? Duct tape
it does everything, doesn't it?
Right? So sometimes we need just a quick fix, right? We need to just kind of move along in life and just, fix a rip in the chair or whatever it is. But duct tape, it has so many uses, like thousands, I'm sure. And so it holds things together, too, for a while. It isn't permanent, right? We know that. But sometimes we need to just find a solution that will work for now that's not unhealthy, but so that we can move on to the things in our life that need more attention.
Okay, how about some vice grips? Maybe some people have vice grips too. Okay, I see a hand. What do we use vice grips for? Holding things together. Exactly. So in our toolbox for mental health, we need to hold things together sometimes, right? It could be temporarily with the duct tape. It could be permanently, but we need something tight to hold on to. And we will be mentioning as we go along too, I think probably everyone in the room is a believer in Jesus Christ. That's why you're maybe here. If you are, we know that Jesus is the ultimate solution, right, to our problems. But one thing that we've seen and heard, and tell us if you've heard this, people will say to someone who's struggling with depression or anxiety, you just need to have more faith. If you prayed more, things would be better. So what do we think about that? Yes, we do truly believe Jesus is our solution, right? And prayer and devotion time and getting closer to the Lord is definitely going to help us in so many ways. But just remember that what we're going to talk about today are illnesses that actually arise from our body. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I won't get into it yet, but it's an illness. Yeah, Linda.
If you break your leg, Jesus can miraculously heal it. But how many of the millions of people with broken legs get that?
Right. they go to an emergency room. They get treatment. Yes, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. So, okay.
So next, we're going to pull a flashlight out of the toolbox.
Oh, and we can
So-
probably all say we have a flashlight.
Right, and so flashlights help us to see where we're going. They can help you see a lot of things. And one of the things in mental health is called insight. Sometimes we need to do some self-reflection. We need to take a look at our life and do kind of an inventory or an evaluation. And so that was kind of the representation there, is to just remember to and leave the light on. And Jesus is the light as well. So light is important.
Yes. Okay, how about sandpaper? How many people love to use sandpaper? I don't. But what does sandpaper do? Smooths out the rough edges, right? So in our life, we have some rough edges sometimes, and maybe our rough patch right now is struggling with the stress of life or anxiety or depression. So we are going to give you some tools to hopefully deal with that and smooth out those rough edges.
Right, and then there were a couple things. Larry didn't have a hard hat, but he has some gloves and some earplugs. So those do what when you're working?
I was told goggles.
Yeah, goggles, right, okay. So what are they doing for him? Right, so protection. So that's a really important part of mental health is protection. Sometimes we need to protect ourselves from even other people, right? And some of the maybe things that they say or things they do that are harmful to us, and we have to set limits and boundaries. And so protection's really important in that aspect.
Hey, I think the next thing we have is a hammer, because we're going to just hammer this stuff over your head today. No. What could a hammer be, Michelle? That took us a while, didn't it? Hammer. But here's what we decided. Once you've put these tools into place and you're using some of the tools to relieve stress, deal with anxiety, depression, well, guess what?
Not so much in the past. A lot of people think about their mistakes and just sort of mull over those and think about that, and it's self-defeating and self-depreciating. And we need to, look forward and set goals and measure our success.
Yeah, so we had a lot of tools.
Thank you, Larry.
And give Larry a hand. He did a great job. Thank you. Sometimes our husbands are roped in and they don't have much of a choice. But I appreciate it very much. So as we started to say a little bit about mental health disorders or mental illnesses, and anxiety and depression are considered mental illnesses, what we really want to talk about just for a second here is that they are illnesses. So I'm sure that you guys know, or you've heard the word stigma. There's a stigma in our society about mental illness, that in the past, people did not want to talk about it. It used to be that people thought mental illness was just demon possession, and they were locked up because of that. Once we got to know through our medical research and science a lot more about the brain and how it works, these disorders do arise from our brain. And our brain is an organ in our body, right? One of the biggest ones. So if you had a brain tumor, as Linda said about the broken leg, do you think that if someone said to you, you know what, you just need to suck it up, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you'll be okay, right? Pray more, whatever it is people say to you. Would that work for a brain tumor? No. Probably not. So we have to start looking at mental illness as an illness just like any other. It can be caused from chemical imbalances. It can be caused from stressful life events or trauma. There's so many things that can cause it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But please make sure that if you're talking to someone after this, a family member, a friend, that doesn't want to get help and just feels like, oh, if I just tried harder, I'll be okay, that doesn't always work. Because people try very hard and they still need to get help. And that means admitting it's an illness and just kind of like you said, measuring, well, what are my symptoms? Do I need to go somewhere to get help? And including everything in the toolbox that we're going to talk about, and including Jesus, right? And prayer and our devotional time. And we are so blessed that we have those tools especially, right?
Right, amen. So just want to run through some statistics in case you don't have a clue how mental illness affects people. According to the World Health Organization, 322 million people in the world suffer from depression. And there is also, depression is the leading cause of disability throughout the world. Women are twice as likely to be affected by depression than men.
Is that because of the men, you think?
Well, I wasn't going to say.
Just kidding, men.
According to the Psych Congress, the depression rate in the U.S. has tripled due to COVID. So that's really something to think about. Science Daily reports a healthy diet and weight loss can reduce depression symptoms. And then MindWise reports that improvement is evident in 80% of those who sought and received treatment for depression. So there's always hope.
Right. We talk a lot about hope.
Yeah. Insomnia is a pretty big problem. Who here has had insomnia? Can't sleep, difficulty sleeping?
Can't sleep, or wake up after you go to sleep, or can't go to sleep. Okay.
Right. There's several different types of insomnia, but it's pretty common, actually. According to the American Sleep Association, 50 to 70 million adults have a sleep disorder. 48% of you snore. So about half of you snore here.
Who wants to admit that they snore? Okay.
23%
Brave people.
of adults have sleeping problems due to stress and anxiety, according to the National Sleep Foundation. And then according to sleephealth.org, 70% of American adults report they have insufficient sleep.
How much is sufficient?
So it varies with our age, but around our ages, put us all together.
Yeah.
Epstein here is it's prolonged release melatonin. That's a slow-acting melatonin. And if you take melatonin, do not take more than 10 milligrams. I would start out at 3 to 5 milligrams.
So we can see from those statistics, it's a big problem in our society, isn't it? And we all know what the root cause of the problems in our society are, right? If we read the Bible and believe, what's happening in prophecy, but we have to live in the now, right now. And so an overview of what we're going to do today is we broke this into 4 different sections. We're going to first talk about anxiety. Stress and anxiety are sometimes used together, but anxiety can be an actual diagnosed disorder, whereas usually stress is just something that we all experience, right? Then we're going to talk about sleep. Then we're going to talk about depression, and then finally we'll have a little segment on suicide. And maybe some of you here have lost a family member or a loved one to suicide, and we can't even stress how devastating and horrible it is when that happens, but we're going to talk a little bit about that because maybe you're wondering, what should I say to people if I think they are, if a friend or family member has that? So we're going to go into all that. But we're going to start off with anxiety first. So how many here would be willing to admit that you've had anxiety or been anxious? You all know what that feeling is, right? That feeling in the pit of your stomach, something's wrong. Well, when it goes into an actual disorder, there's some symptoms that actually follow that can be pretty severe. So if you've been diagnosed, you know what we're saying, and we're going to go over some of those symptoms. And interestingly enough, Michelle, do you know how most people get diagnosed with anxiety?
I do because you told me.
Anybody have a clue? No. Emergency room visits where they think that they're having a heart attack. Oh, okay. Because anxiety can cause those symptoms of chest pressure and shortness of breath and even pain, and people think something's wrong with my heart. They go to the emergency room, and many, many times it could be panic, anxiety, and that is the number one way people get actually diagnosed. But we'll go ahead and if you want to talk about the symptoms.
Sure. So one important thing is that 50% of people that are diagnosed with depression also have anxiety diagnosis as well.
Kind of go hand in hand.
Right, they do. I call them ugly cousins. They're just linked, and they can't get away from each other. They can, but they don't. They like to hang around each other. It seems like. So with anxiety. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America said that in terms of causes, they're not fully well known or well understood. But previous life experiences appear to be a trigger. Adverse childhood events, trauma, genetics, underlying health issues such as diabetes, respiratory disorders, pain is a very big one that I see a lot. Thyroid problems, drug use, and then others not mentioned. I think you did say something about, no, that was sleep. Never mind. And actually, certain personality types are more prone to anxiety. And I'm kind of laughing because I know that I have that personality type. Type A, any type A's in here? So we put pressure on ourselves, basically, is what we put a standard that's just unachievable. We make a goal list and there's 50 things on it and we're not going to get any of them done.
And then we
we're
feel
gonna
like
be
we
anxious about
failed
it.
if we didn't do it all.
Right, exactly. So symptoms, Patty did touch on them: feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, having a sense of impending doom, something bad's going to happen to me, having an increased heart rate, that'd be over about 100, we see, breathing rapidly, hyperventilation, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired. It's exhausting to be anxious. Trouble concentrating, right? So these are symptoms that do cross over with other disorders. So if you have any of these, it doesn't mean that you have an anxiety diagnosis, but you have trouble sleeping because your mind won't shut down. I hear that a lot. Have difficulty controlling worrying, and then have the urge to avoid things that trigger anxiety. I hear a lot crowds. So that's pretty common in the veteran population.
Kind of a social anxiety.
Right. So there's treatment available. And prayer is always at the top of this list. If I don't say it, you just know it. In the moment, pray, Lord, I need help right now. So treatments that are evidence-based are therapies, supportive, interpersonal, cognitive behavioral therapy. Is there anything you want to say about cognitive behavioral therapy? It's very big and common
If you go to counseling right now, most of the time they're using cognitive behavioral therapy. If you break that down, the word cognitive is referring to the mind or how you think, and then behavioral, of course, how you behave. So it's based on the theory that how you behave is actually based on how you think and learned behaviors from your past. So they put that together. There's something called faulty thinking, and let's see if you guys have ever done any of this. I can never do anything right. Nobody likes me.
Negative self-talk.
Nobody. Everybody hates me. Those are what they call cognitive distortions because they're not true. We know that everybody in their life does something right, so it's really not true but we sometimes are very negative about ourselves and tell ourselves these things. And so if you've ever found yourself doing that, cognitive therapy helps you to get rid of those negative thoughts and replace them with positive. A lot of those thoughts come from our childhood experiences. So if people had trauma, abuse, dysfunction in their families, many times it comes out in the form, and a lot of times way later, when you're an adult. If you've never dealt with the issues, it can come out as this negative thinking. And so cognitive behavioral therapy teaches people how to reframe those thoughts into more positive thoughts. So reframing, I can never do anything right, would be something like, I sometimes make mistakes, but many times I do things right. So you would reframe it more a positive thing like that. So that's what the cognitive behavioral therapy is focused on.
It's used a lot in therapy now. So therapies help people change their relationship with anxiety symptoms as well. So in terms of medication for anxiety, we always want patients to exercise and eat a healthy diet. You can use relaxation techniques, develop coping strategies, which Patty will talk more about in a minute. I can remember once asking a patient, oftentimes, and maybe this would happen if I asked you, tell me your top 2 or 3 coping strategies or coping skills. Yeah. And there's no response. It's not, maybe you don't associate it with something that you do, but some people just don't have any. I had a patient tell me once, I said, tell me what your coping skill is. I sleep. I said, that is not a skill. It just really isn't. Let's work on that here. So in terms of medication, if a patient comes to me, they've tried all of these things, we've tried therapy, and then it's not working. That's why they're back to see me. They've tried these things. SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that's a first-line medication treatment for anxiety. Thankfully, it is also first-line medication treatment for depression. So they work for both because they're connected anyways, and so we don't have to do 2 different medications, Right. Polypharmacy is not ideal. So SSRIs, you've probably heard, people are talking about things more nowadays. Prozac, Zoloft, there's many of them, but they basically, in essence, increase the levels of serotonin circulating around in your bloodstream, and your body likes serotonin. It helps mood and hunger and sleep.
Right. And when we said that mental illness sometimes has a biochemical cause, we're talking about chemicals in your brain that you may not have enough of through no fault of your own. But we know that life on this earth has degraded over the centuries with sin, and our bodies are not what they were meant to be, what God meant them to be. So sometimes we have these imbalances with anxiety. It's usually a lack of Y-aminobutyric acid, say that 3 times fast, but it's known as GABA. So I always think of that kids show, GABA, 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 GABA. But when there's not enough, these medications also work on that to increase the amount you have in your brain, and your brain can then handle the anxiety better. So like Michelle said, none of us want to just go to medication. First thing, right? There's going to be a lot of coping skills, hopefully, that you learn, maybe some talk therapy, talking about past experiences or traumas or things like that. But then medication can be extremely helpful for people that are almost paralyzed by anxiety. And I've had patients with that. Michelle's had patients with that. They literally can't leave their house. They can't function. They can't go to work, things like that. So medications can be really helpful, especially with the chemical imbalances.
Right.
So.
And so some people say, if I try this medicine, do I have to be on it forever?
Right.
And I say, well, some people do, yes. But the recommendation is if you've been symptom-free for 12 months, then you may taper off if that's what you and your healthcare provider decide. So please remember, don't ever stop taking medication abruptly. Always talk with your provider about that. And there was something I was going to say. Oh, serotonin. Does anybody in here know how our bodies produce serotonin, that happy chemical? Go ahead. Exactly. 90% of the serotonin receptors are in your gut. So that leads us to think, how would we develop serotonin? Yes, exactly. Yes. And so I can give a medication to a patient that increases the levels of serotonin, but if they don't have enough in their body in the first place, so it kind of goes back to healthy eating, eating the right foods. So just wanted to kind of mention it's kind of important. Then one more thing about anxiety. If you go to your healthcare provider, mental health, primary care, sometimes they'll do something called screening. So there's certain screening, evidence-based tools that we use. We don't just, you're anxious? Okay, here you go. Here's your whatever you need.
That's that word tool again.
Right, there you go. So these standardized tools have been used for a long time. So there's certain screening tools that they will likely use for you. So.
And one other thing, some people, a lot of times the students ask me, well, anxiety, isn't that just being fearful? It's being scared. What's the difference between fear and anxiety? So we usually explain it something like this. How many of you guys ever been hiking out west? Montana, Wyoming, anybody? Okay. Or even if you're hiking somewhere where there could be some danger involved. Say you're hiking in the mountains of Wyoming, and up in front of you across the path comes a grizzly bear. Are you scared? Probably. It's fear, but you can say, why are you scared in that moment? Can you pinpoint the reason you're scared? Yeah, the bear, exactly. But with anxiety, so many patients, so many people say to us, I don't know why I'm anxious. I just, all of a sudden, I feel panicky and I don't know. There wasn't a trigger. There wasn't a specific thing. It's more vague, and they don't always know to say, here's why, like you can with fear. So anxiety can be very vague, and until you kind of start maybe, doing some coping skills and maybe talking in therapy, you might not realize what the underlying causes are. Linda?
Is it anxiety when you know that people have seen bears where you're hiking?
So you already knew that before you went hiking, you're saying, and they've already seen it.
Seen a bear, but you know that
You feel nervous because you could see a bear. Well,
it's an important point. There's a lot of anticipatory anxiety that never happens. You may never see the bear.
Right. People are very scared about what things could happen. Mm-hmm. It could be more of an anxiety, really, than an actual specified fear. So, okay, we got our first handout. So I think Frank and Larry are going to hand out. This is called Colorful Coping. Now, what we're going to hand you today are some things that you can put in your folder to take home. These are coping skills. And like Michelle said, sometimes it will list prayer, devotional. So if it's not listed, just know that's number one. That we use, our connection with God, our relationship with Him, and our prayer life to really help. And He will help us with that. But these are some colorful things that you can take this home and stick it on your fridge. And Larry, when you're done, if you want to bring one up here, because I didn't, we'll look at them real quick. How are we doing? Okay, I won't take the time to read them all to you. You can read them. But what we would like you to do, does everybody have a pen or something to write with? If not, we might be able to find you one. We'd like you to look through this list, okay, the colorful coping list, and go down there and circle either the things that you're already doing or something that you might try. You might see something on here that looks fun. I mean, look at one of these as jigsaw puzzles. How can that be a coping skill? Doing a puzzle? Well, there have actually been research studies done on puzzles that shows that doing a puzzle gives you a feeling of accomplishment. It actually is a stress reliever. It can lower your blood pressure and your heart rate as you're doing it. Now, of course, if you get to the end, Michelle, and there's one piece missing, your blood pressure might shoot right up. That actually happened to our family recently. But there's some fun things on here. So these are coping skills / stress relievers, okay? So if you have some stress in your life, and most everybody actually become physically or mentally ill from stress. So it's so important to stay healthy to do some coping skills. So like we mentioned, prayer, Bible study, talking to the Lord, that's very, very important. But here's some other ones. We're going to talk about sleep in a little while, but we've got keep a regular sleep schedule. Go outside. Studies are showing nature, just being among trees, is a stress reliever. I believe that. Who believes that? When you get outside, man, I'm telling you, and not only trees, but if I ever get the privilege of going to Ken and Jody's house up at the lake, my stress is way relieved because I can sit in front of that on that beach and just watch those waves roll in. It's the most awesome thing ever. So nature is just really, really important. Deep breathing, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Find some joy. Maybe you have some hobbies that you like to do. I really do try to practice what I preach. So I do have certain things I go to. I love photography and scrapbooking. A lot of you might know that. And so when I want to spend maybe a half an hour on a stress reliever, an hour, I will sit down at my table and actually get my pictures out and put them in scrapbooks and label them and do the things that really brings me joy and relieves my stress. Yeah, Linda.
The trick is that you enjoy.
Yes.
If you want a miserable Linda, sit her down with a 500-piece puzzle.
There you go.
It's yours.
That's a good point. We said try a puzzle, but if you hate it, don't try that. It's going to make your stress go up and not down, right? So find some joy, hobbies, listening to music, watching something funny, a funny movie or something funny on television. And Michelle and I both love this next one, and we try to live by this. Always have something to look forward to. What does that mean?
Vacation.
Does that mean I have to have a $10,000 trip to a resort in Mexico? What do you think? Ken, what could you look forward to that's simple and cheap and free? Walk on the beach. Exactly. Maybe we have a lunch date next week, and I'll say, I'm looking forward to seeing Michelle on that day. It can be something so simple, and it doesn't have to be money. Maybe it's a trip or getting away, or maybe it's that, tomorrow I'm going to carve out an hour in my schedule to do something just fun. Just always have something to look forward to. It really helps our overall mood.
Patty told me that 20-some years ago, and I still tell people, at least on a weekly basis, and I live by it, and it works.
It works. Journaling, I don't know if many of you like to write. Linda's a writer. Journaling can really be helpful. Getting regular exercise, expressing gratitude. I won't read all these. How about this one? Take breaks from watching the news and being on social media. Could you do that? Could you circle that one as one that you could do? Or you do? Yeah, it's very important because it can drag us down. We do need to be aware of what's going on in the world. We need to be aware, for sure, and pray about that and give your stress and anxiety over what's happening in our society to God. But you need a break from it, too. Social media can be very negative, and there's been many studies. A new one just came out last week about Instagram and teenage girls. I don't know if you saw that. That is damaging to teenage girls, to their self-esteem, and that can lead to depression. And we know because people put their perfect images up there. They make it look like their life is perfect, they're perfect, or people can be bullied on social media. So take a break from that. That's a really good thing as well. Of course, the prayer, devotional. And at the end of this, we said, write down what you're going to do. When you go home today, maybe write down what you want to try on a regular basis to relieve stress. Put it somewhere that you're going to see it. Most everybody sees it on their fridge because we all go to the fridge, right? But commit to something. Be accountable for it. Get a stress partner that somebody will help you, or get an app on your phone or something. Set reminders for yourself. I'm going to do this on a regular basis to release stress. And these are just some, okay, that we're going to talk about. But who circled anything? Tell me something that you circled. Either that you do already or you will try. Exercise. So Jody says exercise. Good one. She already does that. And she's going to keep doing that. Okay? Well, anybody else circle something? Yeah.
Always have something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's a good one. I hope everybody circles that one. Anybody else? Go outside. I know. Even, Frank, I don't know about you, but even when you're outside doing something you have to do, it seems like you're happier outside. If you have to mow, at least it's outside in the fresh air, right? Yeah, so really important. So circle a few of those, write some in that you already do maybe in the bottom. Does anybody want to share something they do now that's not on this list that's a good stress reliever? Yeah. Can you, I didn't, oh yeah, can you guys take that mic?
Amen.
Go ahead and take it around. I don't know what she said, but.
She does devotions in the morning. She
Yes.
opens the Bible, and then she journals.
Yes, that's really good. That is so good. And one thing I found with my Bible study is delving into not just sitting there and reading a whole chapter and then I don't know what I read, but just take a few verses and really dig into them and, what's Jesus trying to tell me through this? So, okay.
Sometimes I just read out loud in the mornings because I have trouble concentrating. So
Yeah,
I just say,
that
I'm just going
helps.
to read out loud. It helps, yeah.
And sometimes I might even sing a praise song out loud. Some of the ones that we do some here at church. Anybody else want to share something that's not on the list that they've done? Okay, we'll move on. We're going to end this little session on anxiety before we ask for questions on a couple other tools that we want you guys to have. One is called deep breathing. How many have ever practiced deep breathing for stress or anxiety? Okay, it works so well, and it's the number one thing that we teach our nursing students to teach patients. Just about every person in the hospital is anxious, whether it's that they've got a bad diagnosis, they're going to have treatment they're scared about, right? A lot of vulnerability. So deep breathing, huh? Yes, exactly, especially these days. So it's very simple. You just need to close your eyes if you want to, and then you take a very deep breath in and hold it. You can count to about 5 or even more, and then you slowly let it out. So what we do with patients on the unit that are very anxious is we say, match my breathing. And then we do that, and they try to slow their breathing down and match that with us. And we do 5 to 10 repetitions of that very slow in, holding it, and letting it out. And 99.9% of the time, if you do that 10 times, you are automatically less stressed, less anxious. Your blood pressure is going down, your pulse rate is going down, your breathing rate is going down, and those are the things that show us physiologically in our body that we're actually handling stress and we're getting rid of some of the anxiety. So that's a very important one. And I've used this in crisis. If something bad has really happened, make myself stop and breathe. But here's one that we're going to get up and stand up and do, okay? Last thing we're going to do. This is called, how many people have heard of progressive muscle relaxation? Anybody? PMR. All right. This is so great, and I've taught this to a lot of people, even some friends of mine that now use it. So the theory is that before you do this, you're stressed. You're going to be more relaxed after this. So I want you to picture in your mind, not a stick figure, but the outline of a person, okay? So we got the head and the arms and the legs, just an outline, okay? And in this version, we're going to say that they are filled up with red liquid right to the top of their head, okay? And in your mind, I want you to name that red liquid. Is it stress? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it anger? Are you angry at somebody? Okay, whatever it is, you name what you want it to be. So we're going to start with the top of our head, and we're going to progressively tense and then relax our muscles. So the first thing I want you guys to do, and it sounds funny, but tense your head as hard as you can. Okay, and then let that go. You probably about 5 to 10 seconds. Now in your mind, I want you to see that person's red liquid level go down just a little bit. Okay, it just went down a little. Now you're going to do your neck. Can you tense as hard as you can your neck? And then let it go. In your mind, I want you to see that red liquid going down just a little bit more, just a little. Okay, now we're at our shoulders. So tense your shoulders up. Let that go. See that red liquid going down a little bit? Okay, now it's your chest muscles and your abdominal muscles. As hard as you can, clench. Okay, and then just kind of relax that. Oh, look, that liquid's going down farther. Okay, now we're at the legs. Tense your legs as hard as you can. We're standing up, so you should be able to clench them hard. Okay, and let go. And the last thing we're going to do is our feet. Clench your feet. Don't fall over. Let that go, and in your mind, I want you to see the very last drop of that red liquid drain out of the body. So, when you're done with this exercise, it only takes a few minutes. Hopefully, you feel a little bit more relaxed. So, I don't know, does anybody feel any more relaxed? This really works with our patients many times. When you're in a really stressful situation, take 5 minutes out and say, okay, I'm going to do the tense and relax thing. And you don't have to use the visualization with the red liquid if you don't want to. That sometimes helps people to just name that. I'm really anxious, so I'm going to visualize that getting out of my body. And you can be praying during that time too. Many times, our patients that do have faith and have believers, I've said add some prayers to that during that. When you're tensing, just, Jesus, please help me, be with me, things like that really works. So, okay. So we're going to ask you guys just real quick if you have any questions. And while do we have a giveaway for this one?
We have a question for Michelle on serotonin. What foods, healthy foods, are good for helping to provide the serotonin?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to go to Mr. Google here
Fruits and veggies
because
and yeah, I was going to say, a lot of it is the Mediterranean diet, you guys, right? It's nuts,
We have
seeds.
another nurse practitioner here in
Yes.
the back that has a list that they would like to share.
That's our third partner.
Yay.
I said apples, pineapples, almonds, beans, salmon, turkey, the foods that are high in
Just me?
probiotics like natural coleslaw, kefir, things like that.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, those are great. A lot of things that are on the Mediterranean diet, and also fruits, like you mentioned some of the fruits. And you can't go wrong with veggies, right, Terry? All the vegetables are also really good.
There's some really interesting newer studies about gut flora. There's a very big connection between the gut and the brain. And he's an amazing psychiatrist, probably one of those leading psychiatrists in the world. He's a brainiac, just no pun intended, but he's so incredible. His name is Roger McIntyre. I go see him every year, and he always has something. He's from Canada. And he does some very good podcasts on brain and gut health, the connection. And so probiotics, things that are good in probiotics, are really good for the body and the brain. And so you may want to kind of check into that, because probiotics are kind of on a lot of talking points right now for, is that me or?
No, I'm not moving and something's happening. But
With, human immunity as well. So thank you, Terry.
we have something that Larry and Frank are going to hand out while we get this next question. They can be handing it out. We're going to call these our stretchy men, or stretchy women. We found these and thought they were very funny. But have you guys all heard of the fidget toys and things that people do for stress and anxiety that they hold? We found these little stretchers. You're supposed to be able to stretch them and release, and it's supposed to be, I'm going to take this off. It's supposed to be to relieve anxiety. So we're going to give you each one of these, but just a disclaimer, Michelle tried it and she pulled his arm right off. So
I pulled his head right off.
she was very stressed at the moment. So they're just fun, and wanted to just give you guys that to have a laugh and have something fun. I'm not sure if it's me or him or... Yeah, okay. So I think we had a question over here, Larry. I don't know if you have a mic and you can, or Frank does. Oh, the melatonin you can buy over the counter. But go ahead, Michelle.
Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Yeah, specifically you're talking about melatonin?
Well, both of those that you mentioned, I was just curious if those are over the counter or those are...
They are, yes.
Yep.
Probiotics.
Yes.
Also, it's in yogurt, foods like that. So it's really just bacteria in the gut. That's pretty much what that is.
Yeah, the
But
yogurt with active cultures.
Right.
Yeah, so you can go in the drugstore and buy it without a prescription, basically.
I'm sorry, I can't hear him. Can you?
No, I don't think that's on, Larry. I don't know.
The melatonin over the counter, yes. Walmart has it, but one thing that I did mention, I'm not sure if you caught it, was the sustained release melatonin. That seems to, I actually had a patient say it works far better than the immediate release. So,
Something to try.
They're easy to kill, apparently.
yeah, cool.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Really.
I don't know. Did everybody hear what Terry was saying?
So Terry said that melatonin actually comes in an immediate and a sustained release so that you get kind of a dump of the melatonin immediately, but then it'll keep it more steadily through the night as well. So it's a combination drug, over-the-counter hormone.
Okay, anybody else for a question, real quick, and then we move on a little bit. Yep, there you go, Larry.
If someone, are you hearing me? If someone's reluctant to visit a doctor with their, is there like support groups besides the doctor they can go to?
So support groups for the person that's feeling it, but they don't want to go to a doctor. There's so many different things.
There are community.
If it's very severe symptoms, we always say, oh, sorry, I don't think, can you guys, is that better? Because I didn't think it was on. If it's very severe symptoms, we always say try to get the person to go because they can get relief, and it could really be affecting their functioning. But if they just have some symptoms and they don't want to try that, we were just talking about this, there are apps that you can get on your phone for anxiety relief, deep breathing. There are some support groups. You would have to look in whatever county you live in, but I know at Catalyst, which is our mental health center in Richland County, they have some support groups for different things. I'm not sure if it's a specific anxiety support group, but they can look online. And actually, did you guys know there's online support groups now? You never have to leave your house. You can actually chat on an online support group for different things as well. So it is a really good question because there are people that are very reluctant, right, to go and get help. So if you're a family member or a friend, you're like, what can I do to help them? Share some coping skills. Share that you really believe it's an illness that they need some help with, and then maybe help them find, possibly Google coping or a support system in your area.
And many people don't know, in the Richland County area, in most counties, there is a number called 211. You call that number, it's like a community resource hub.
Right.
You could tell them, I'm looking for a group. Maybe it's a grieving group. Maybe it's a group for widows. It could be, they'll just let you know what's available, but also a really good question because there's a lot of people that do feel that way. You could go into a therapist or a counselor, and oftentimes they'll work in groups with, at the VA we have mental health medication providers, and then we have therapists. Some of my patients, the therapist, or tell someone to do that, or call 211.
And one note about therapy, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more with the depression, but some people are very reluctant when they hear the word therapy. They're like, am I going to be laying on a couch and there's a psychiatrist asking me, how do I feel about that? Or they have in their mind that maybe they're going to be using new age techniques. I've had many people say to me, I don't want to go somewhere where they're using crystals or, things that I don't believe in. And that is a big concern. Agencies in this community that all the therapists there, it's a Christian counseling agency, so that's something really good to know as well. But I think we're way past our time, but just to end up, if you have any of these symptoms that are severe or you know someone, encourage them about getting help. It's an illness, but try to do these coping skills, stress relievers on a regular basis. You can't do one today and then one 3 weeks from now and think that that's going to be working. It's not. You have to kind of do it. If it's severe, definitely get help. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think we're going to have a break after this next one. I think we'll go right into sleep.
Okay, great, but don't sleep.
Not that we're going to sleep. Don't sleep.
You have a list there. I want you to stick that in your folder, and then I'm not going to go through that list, but I do want you to do that if sleep is a concern for you. So according to the article in Healthline magazine, there are 10 reasons that sleep is important. Poor sleep is connected with increased body weight. Short sleep time is one of the biggest. 7 to 8 hours per night has been linked to increased risk for heart disease and stroke. And studies have shown that short sleep duration is linked to type 2 diabetes, And also, Patty, you want to mention what else it's linked to?
Yeah, a big study just was recently released where they actually linked insomnia, chronic insomnia, so for a lot of years, as being a big risk factor for our body
Yes.
as we sleep of problems. So when we're not sleeping, we're not getting that healing action and problems can get worse.
Right. So lack of and poor sleep is linked to inflammation in the body. And lastly, sleep affects emotions and social interactions. Lack thereof can limit the use of social skills. So anybody grouchy sometimes in the morning? Yeah, that's right. So symptoms of inadequate sleep: irritability, difficulty falling asleep at night, waking up during the night, waking up too early, not feeling rested after a night's sleep, depression, anxiety, difficulty shifts, like not a first shift but a second or third shift job. Anybody here ever done that? Yeah. Evening. Underlying medical issues can be causes for insomnia, like sleep apnea, pain, diabetes, restless leg, and many more. Mental health disorder, very routine, we can predict these stages: REM sleep, non-REM sleep.
More thing about sleep apnea. This can be a very serious disorder. And one of the big signs is your doctor or your nurse practitioner to refer you to a sleep lab. Both my husband and myself were diagnosed with sleep apnea. And it was when I was in the hospital with pneumonia a couple of years ago. And people can sleep well. So just a note about how serious that is. So please get that checked out if you have that severe snoring or somebody said that you have actually stopped breathing for periods of time, which is the apnea part. That's what apnea means, is lack of breathing. So you're just for a very short amount of time, you stop breathing.
Right. I probably send about 70% of my patients for a sleep. Go get help. It'll improve the quality of your life tremendously. If you do have sleep apnea, or they can look at, there may be another thing, something going on. Again, cognitive behavioral therapy is actually the light in your bedroom. So it needs to be dark. Our body needs darkness. So put that mask on. I wear my mask every night, and my husband laughs and laughs and laughs at me, but he isn't laughing. Because that hum, that constant noise, sometimes that helps people get to sleep. So whether it's silence or the white noise, those are both good things to try. Right. And so another medications, sometimes people, and when we talk about medications for either anxiety or depression or insomnia, we're talking about them because everything else we've tried has not worked.
What is cognitive behavioral therapy going to do for me because I'm not sleeping?
Well, it's going to, so cognitive behavioral therapy, like Patty said, there's apps on your phone, check those out too, is if you have 10 things you've got to do tomorrow and you're afraid you're going to forget them,
Sometimes if I can't sleep, I just start going in my mind, who am I praying for right now? Okay, and then I pray, and then I pray for the next. Now, I will tell you, a lot of times I fall asleep like that. But what better way to fall asleep than
An observation.
Hold on, you must be on the mic to have an observation.
Okay. I have found that if I pray intercessory prayers,
And as I tell my nursing students, do you know
Yes, this year. Especially this year. This year, more than ever. Not because it wasn't so bad. Not because next year will be better. Not because some good things happened. Not even just because God says so. Rejoice in the Lord, you people of the Lord, because Christ is Lord. This is the year of the Lord's favor. This is the year of God's grace. Again, we are still the redeemed, still ransomed by the blood, still furiously convinced, especially this year, that neither life, nor death, nor pandemic, nor lockdown, nor masks, nor isolation, nor anything else in all of creation can separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. We will give thanks this year, not in spite of what was lost, but because of what cannot be. We'll rejoice in the Lord because we are the people of the Lord. Let's do more than count our blessings. Let's count ourselves among the blessed. I'll say it again. Rejoice. Yes.
But we are going to start talking about depression. And we said that it went along with anxiety many times, and stress goes along with anxiety. So we're like bundling them up. Sometimes it's hard to separate them. Somebody has one, they may have two or three. So I think, first of all, Michelle's going to just talk a little bit about an overview of what depression is, because you might not be for sure what symptoms. We all have down days. We've all had what people call the blues, right? A blue mood. Is that depression? Is it a diagnosable depression? So we're going to look at some of those symptoms.
So yes, we all do have down days. However, when we see some of the symptoms that I'm going to talk about present for a 2-week period of time, then we start to get concerned. If you have a day here and there, you can use some coping strategies. Is my mic really loud?
Mine seems to be too. But better than not hearing, right?
Okay, I'll try to talk soft. So that's when we get concerned, when there's a 2-week time period that these symptoms happen more frequently than they should. So those symptoms can be changes in sleep. Maybe you're sleeping too much. Maybe you're not sleeping enough. It can be either or. And changes in appetite. Maybe you're eating too much. Maybe you're not eating enough. Difficulty concentrating. Remember, that was with anxiety as well. Lack of energy. We call this anergia. And then also lack of interest in things. We call this anhedonia. Lack of interest in doing the things you like to do. Not like, I think, Linda, you said, you don't want to do puzzles. That does not mean that you have, anhedonia, okay? Because you don't like puzzles.
But if you used to like it and you don't do it anymore,
Right.
as anhedonia, and you're losing your joy in things that you used to have joy in.
Right. So feeling hopeless, helpless, worthless, feeling guilty, that's another thing that'll get people. And then changes in movement. So psychomotor retardation is when you just sit like this. That's not normal. You need to be interactive. So that would be something it's obvious, something you can see. And then physical aches and pains. Sometimes patients just have a pain and it's it's really more of a perception. It's not necessarily so much pain, but it's just something they complain about, So those are symptoms of depression. Not everybody has all those symptoms. And even with anxiety, one of the things they didn't mention that I see a lot is irritability, just grouchy, just mean. Some people are just, that's a symptom. So some of the causes of depression: trauma, genetics, life circumstances, brain changes, medical conditions, and drug and alcohol use. So there's quite a lot of causes. And sometimes, and same with patients that have suicidal thoughts, and if we walked in the shoes of someone who lost their spouse, who lost a child, if we knew what people felt, we might be where they are. That's the one thing about stigma that's so bothersome is, if I walked in the shoes of someone who's had experiences as they've had, child abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all of that, I might be in the same place that they are. I've just maybe been privileged not to have some of those experiences. So life can really get a hold of you, and it's hard. It's really hard. So treatment, there is treatment, and actually, medications, first-line medications, it's the bottom of my list though, right? Because we're going to try some other things, are SSRIs, like we talked about for anxiety. Mood stabilizers also can help, and meditation, nutrition, acupuncture even, light therapy. I do prescribe phototherapy for my patients, sometimes especially in the winter, and psychotherapy. I just really don't like that term, but it's counseling therapy. And then you guys have probably heard of ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. It really was popular way back in the day, and it's actually coming around again.
It kind of got a bad rap.
Yeah.
Shock therapy. That's horrible. That's terrible. It did. Back in the 50s, 1950s and 40s, when they first developed it, it was not where it is now, but it has come back around to be a really good, viable treatment for severe depression. They even use it sometimes with bipolar mania, different things. And if you'd ever get a chance to see it, it's very interesting. It's not what people think, that someone's flailing around on a bed. It's a little tremor. And why does it work? The theory is that it makes more serotonin in your brain, just like the medications that we're talking about work on serotonin and norepinephrine usually. Those are the things that we're lacking sometimes if we have a chemical imbalance and we have depression. That gives rise to depression symptoms from not having enough serotonin and norepinephrine. And the medications that Michelle listed usually work on those neurochemicals. So we are going to talk more about that in the next segment. But very important to know that depression and suicide, they're tied so closely together you can't untie them. So, okay, where were you?
So the one thing that I think is interesting about ECT is that it actually does induce seizures. That is what we're doing. It is not a bad thing. And if you're at that point that you need ECT, you've tried everything. And it has been proven to be helpful for treatment-resistant depressions. So what's really cool, there's a new treatment called transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's magnets. And it's actually within a mile radius of here. A provider, Dr. Johanna Wilson, does TMS. I'm so excited about it. I wanted to bring it into this area. She did it first. Look, I'm just glad people are trying it. Treatment-resistant depression, there's other indications too, but it's really cool.
Now, one mention about that. When you think magnets, your mind might go to, oh, New Age therapies. This is not the same thing as somebody holding a magnet over you and doing, it's nothing like that. They found that the brain responds different ways to magnetic waves, and that's what this is. It's a very, very different thing. I was going to say something else about, as far as, we really want you to know about depression is it is a, I can't remember how many people you said it affected, but a leading cause of disability. Imagine that. If I asked you guys, what do you think the leading cause of disability in the U.S. is? You probably say things like stroke or, right,
back
someone's
pain.
in a wheelchair or, they had but depression. So think about that. That means lost work time, wages, all those kind of things. It's a huge problem in our country, and I just read that the classification of meds used to treat depression, antidepressants, are the most prescribed classification of medication in the United States. So imagine how many people are on medication for depression. And I think there's a lot of society causes for that. We could talk about how the world is getting worse and worse and making people more stressed and depressed. But again, it arises from our brain and possibly having that chemical imbalance that we need treatment for. So if you have friends and family, you know, don't let them say, yeah, I'm just a little bit blue, but you've noticed things. Hey, you're not around anymore, you're isolating, you look very upset, you're crying a lot, you know, things like that. Just really encourage them, or if it's you, get to a provider, because it can turn into very serious things, and the suicidal thoughts are extremely concerning, of course, right, with depression, so.
And some people you cannot tell. Some
Yeah.
people are very good at masking, wearing that mask. They've done it for years. You're never going to know.
We have one handout for you guys for this one. This is a really great one that Michelle found from Akron Children's Hospital. But these are not coping skills for children. They are coping skills for anybody. So you've already got the colorful coping, and now we're going to give you another one. And these are so cool because Michelle and I looked at these, and they're very simple things you can do. I mean, you know, walk outside for 5 minutes, or
Take a sip of cold water.
take some water. Or one of them says, do the dishes. Why would we want to do the dishes? Yeah, small things like that actually can help us feel a sense of accomplishment. When your house is cleaner, mentally you feel better. But Michelle and I joke that this is one we could tell our husbands. Do the dishes, you'll feel better. So, so this is a good one. Just kind of look through those later. Maybe circle those. And you guys can feel free to make copies of these for your friends and family. And if we have any left and there's people that you want to have a folder full of what we gave out today, just come see us at the end and we will make you that folder, okay? So you talked about counseling, and I know that we talked about some people being very resistant to counseling. So what have you guys heard? We were going to have you write this down, but I think for time, we'll just say, what have you heard about counseling that would make you not want to go? What are the, what people think about counseling? Like, oh, I would never do that. What have you heard people say about that? A stigma, like I must be, what people think I'm crazy if I go
Or
to
weak.
counseling. Or weak, if I was just stronger, right? And back to Michelle, if I just prayed enough, right? My depression's going to go away. So stigma's one thing for sure.
And worry about, in my weakened state, how will this person, the counselor's values shape me?
Okay, so questions about their methods, and you're already feeling in a weakened state. So those are, yep. And I mentioned earlier, you know, there've been some, I don't know what you to call them, shysters, or, you know, some therapists that use very questionable methods that you would say, no, that's not right, it's not good. But hopefully now, after today, you could say, we know that there's good therapists, there's counseling available out there, there's all kinds of resources for us, and we're going to give you a paper here in a minute with some resources on it. But encourage anybody. Do you know that some famous psychiatrists wrote an article, a few of them, and they said something that pretty much is the prevailing thought today. Anybody could benefit from counseling. Anyone could benefit from counseling. Why do you suppose they said that? What is the benefit of just going and talking to someone? Okay.
It can make you not feel so alone about whatever it is bugging you.
Right. Those are very good answers. Not to feel alone. Talking things out, sometimes out loud, clarifies. And sometimes you don't have anyone else. Would you say the things maybe to a family member or a friend? You might not. But you might say it to an objective person who you believe in and trust, maybe a Christian counselor or a counseling service, that everybody could benefit from having an objective person in their life to talk to.
I think sometimes people use just different names for therapists. You know, life coach.
Right.
I mean, you know, we could say we're going to go talk to our life coach today. They help with prioritizing things. So when we get anxious or depressed, that pressure is so huge that we don't know what to focus on first sometimes, right? So some people can help align us. Hey, today we're going to just talk about this, and you know, we'll work on that smoking or whatever it is later that we really do kind of need to tackle. But today we're going to talk about your feelings and helping you get better, living the best quality of your life. That's really what we're all about when we try to help people that are struggling. How can you live your best quality of life? And then the other thing I wanted to mention is really, really, really important. Linda, you said you're vulnerable when you're in this state. When you go to see someone, you're pouring it out to them. I mean, you've just told them things that, you might not have ever told anybody. So with that comes a professional level of respect, and that's really important for a professional to have. And not everybody does, but most people do. So my point, I guess, then is you participate in your care, whether it's mental health care, physical health care. You do have a responsibility. You are worth it. You are special. You're made by God who crafted you. You have value. And so many people that have mental illness don't believe they're valuable. They don't believe that they're worth much. Well, you are. And so if we can help you live your best life, give you the tools you need, then woe be unto the devil that tries to take you down, because you have power.
Coping skills, they help with new coping skills, and they kind of hold you accountable too. If the therapist gives you some homework, or your life coach gives you some homework or things to try, you're going to go back and see them in a month. You probably are going to try those things, because you're going to have to answer to, well, did you try the things I showed you? So there's so many benefits to that. So we wanted to just talk a minute about the counseling. And I think we can end this. I just want to tell you a little story. I used to work with a doctor. I don't know if anybody remembers Dr. Fernandez, Felipe Fernandez. When I was caring for patients, I worked with him very closely, and he was an amazing psychiatrist, very caring, compassionate. He's probably the best I've ever known and seen. He cared about each patient. And he used to tell us that when people came to his office with depression, of course, he did a good screening and made sure that they weren't suicidal or needing to be hospitalized or needing to be on medication, because it was, how severe is it? And if it was not severe and they were safe, meaning not suicidal, he used to write on a prescription pad 3 things. The first one was get 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. We just talked about that. The second one was move and get some kind of exercise 20 minutes a day. He said that could be I'm walking outside, I'm gardening. It doesn't have to be vigorous, working out at a gym, but just 20 minutes a day. Okay, what do we know that exercise releases? All that good, all those endorphins, those good things to help us feel better. And then the unique one, number 3, was that they had to volunteer somewhere once a week. Now, what do you think that would do for someone with a low mood? You are getting outside yourself, focusing on someone else, helping. It increases self-esteem to feel like you're doing something to give back, to make a positive difference. So he would give them that prescription and say, for 30 days, I just want you to try these things. Then come back and see me. If you're worse, we'll look at other things, some therapy, and, if you need medication, that kind of thing. But he said many people would come back and report that they really improved in 30 days by doing those 3 things. So along with all the other coping skills we gave you, that's another one to write down. Volunteering, get outside yourself, do something for others every week. Some people love to go to an animal shelter and just feed and play with the animals. It doesn't even seem like they're giving back. It's something for them, right? Because we know that do pets lower stress? Absolutely, which we probably don't maybe have written on ours, but we know that that's one. But, homeless, feeding the hungry, getting involved in something like that. And here at our church, get involved with a ministry at church where you're actively doing something on a regular basis that you feel like you're giving back. So it's just so important. And depression is a very devastating illness. And one thing we also like to tell patients is depression is a liar. Do you all know that? Depression is a liar. Because depression tells you things in your brain that aren't true. That nothing will ever get better. It's hopeless. You don't even need to be around anymore. Those things are lies, right? And honestly, we could say they're Satan's lies, right, in our mind. So depression doesn't tell us the truth. That's why we need help, to get help. And if it's as severe as someone feeling suicidal, they need to hear the truth, which is there's hope. There's always hope to get better. With therapy, coping skills, medication, there's a lot of hope. Many, many, many people have gotten so much better from depression, but it is a very serious and devastating illness. And we're going to go into, I think, pretty quick here, the next, unfortunately, the saddest part of depression, which is sometimes suicide. So, but before we start that, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask about depression at this point? Or if you can think of them, we can also come back to those questions too, but anybody? Okay.
They're tired.
Yeah,
can see.
we're winding down. Go ahead, Ken. Oh, wait for the mic. Wait for the mic.
I think in depression, though, sometimes the person's mind becomes like a hamster on a exercise wheel. They can't stop it, and it's just circular. It just keeps coming back, and they don't get a chance to really focus on how to correct it.
Right.
And so that's why they really do need therapy to help step off the wheel.
That's a really good analogy, I think. A lot of people also, this another symptom of depression, which we didn't mention, is guilt. Many people just have these feelings of overwhelming guilt. They many times can't even pinpoint why they feel guilty, but they feel guilt, and maybe it's that I'm a burden on my family, or I just feel this guilt, or like you said, they get stuck in those negative lies that depression tells them, and they can't even stop, and they need that help, either therapy or medication, to stop, for sure. And I don't know, I was just gonna say something else, and it went out of my mind. I'll say it when we move on. Anybody else have anything to say? Ken, you're so right about that, for sure. So depression kind of leads us, unfortunately, into the subject of suicide. And I always tell my students when we do this, if you've lost someone to suicide, and this is a very sensitive subject, feel free to not be here. You can step out of the room. But many, many people, and people in this room, have lost someone that they love to suicide. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the myths are, right? Do you know that there's myths about suicide? So we're going to say some of them, and you guys tell us whether you ever heard this or maybe at one point believed it. So go ahead with the first one, Michelle.
Okay. So I did want to mention that most importantly, before we go on, if you have suicidal thoughts, intentions, or plans, to reach out to somebody. You do matter, and your family loves you, and we don't ever want to have the regrets, that we do have to carry because we've lost someone, because that happens. Should I have done something? Could I have said something? You can't beat yourself up about that. And we'll talk about maybe what some people are thinking when they have those thoughts. But there's always help and there's always hope. Okay, so there are helplines. There's a local 522 help. I think Patty's going to give you that on her resource list. So reach out, just reach out to somebody. So the definition of suicide is the intention of taking one's life. There's some names in the suicide arena. I work with an amazing suicide prevention coordinator, because I don't know that if you guys are aware, but our veteran population is twice as likely to take their own life than a civilian population. They know weapons, they know how to use them, it's very easy. So the VA takes it very serious. Every single encounter with every single patient, I talk about suicide. Definitely, but there's things like completed suicide, unintentional suicides. A lot of people that'll do like heroin with fentanyl, they may die, but they didn't mean to. They were just trying to do their heroin, right? And they died. So there's a lot of talk. Some of it, it's hard to understand. But some myths, here we go. There's 5 that are listed here from NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. They have a local chapter here in town. Patty and I are good friends with the director.
Yes.
I sit on their board, and they love to talk to people about helping them. So one of the myths is suicide only affects individuals with a mental health condition. Right. Many individuals with mental illness are not affected by suicidal thoughts. Some people that have depression don't ever think of suicide. And then not all people who attempt to die by suicide have mental illness. Relationship problems, other life stressors contribute to suicidal thoughts. Legal problems. I mean, how many people do we know in the news we've heard have to go to prison, but they never make it because they don't want to go to prison. They just want to end it, right? Abuse, trauma. Once an individual is suicidal, he or she will always remain suicidal. That's a myth, right? So active suicidal ideation is often short-term and situation-specific. I had a patient tell me once, he's only suicidal, even we may have never seen them in mental health, but they have had some contact. So I think, Terry, you work in primary care, and you know to address this issue. They do screenings for mental health routinely.
But the weird thing is, what she's saying seems to contradict what we were saying before, how depression is so tied. So it is very true that if they have a diagnosed depression, major depression or depression, that suicidal thoughts are very, very common with that illness. However, a lot of people do end their life by suicide that don't have that mental illness. And when we're talking about terms, you've all grown up with the term committed suicide, right? That's what we've all grown up with. That is not any longer a societal accepted term. You know how we always have to be PC, right? Because people that were left after suicide, the families, really began to strongly object to that terminology, because when you say someone committed something, what does it sound like? You committed a crime. And so they feel like their loved one, you know, we'll get into how people feel, but their loved one was not a criminal, so they don't want to hear, you know, committed. So now it's either completed suicide, or many times we just say they ended their life by suicide. So,
Most suicides happen suddenly without warning.
is that a myth?
Yeah, it is. Warning signs verbally or behaviorally precede most suicides. Not all.
Not always.
Therefore, it's important to learn and understand the warning signs, and we'll talk about some of those a bit. And then most people who die by suicide are selfish and take the easy way out.
Have you ever heard that or thought that? Hey, I'm going to put myself in that. Before I got into mental health, I thought, what a selfish act. How could you do that to your family? Have you ever thought that? It's a normal thing to think. But depression, if it's a result of depression, do you know that the latest studies show that depression actually changes our brain? It actually rewires and changes our brain and how we think. So the people that have attempted suicide but lived, many of my patients had that, and to a person, and I know Michelle has had the same thing, they were not thinking clearly or thinking straight, or they weren't themselves when they made that decision. It could have been an impulsive decision. And if it didn't work, what they would say to us later is, I truly felt that my family was better off if I died. I truly felt that. And what do you think the families would all say to that? No, 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 we want you here with us no matter what. But depression changes your brain that you aren't thinking, you're the same person anymore, and you aren't thinking clearly always. So many times they feel that somehow their family is better off without them at that point.
Right.
Because that depression is a liar.
So typically people do not die by suicide because they do not want to live. People die by suicide because they want to end their suffering. And I'm just going to tell you that when you feel really sad, death would be easier in your mind sometimes. When you suffer so much and think, if I just could sleep forever, that would be. But
So it's not so much not wanting to live, but just to get rid of that horrible
and your
pain.
suffering, yes. And you know what?
Exactly.
I thought the way Patty thought. How selfish is that? Well, you know what? Walk in someone's shoes that's,
Exactly.
experienced terrible things in their life, that living is harder
Right,
than it would be to die.
exactly.
Talking about suicide would lead and encourage someone to suicide.
Has anybody ever heard that? Oh, don't talk about it. You might implant the idea in their mind. Believe me, they don't need you to put the idea in their mind. One study showed that over 85% of Americans had fleeting suicidal thoughts in their life, during their life. Now, not that they would act on it, but just a fleeting thought, right? Another myth is that people that talk about it won't do it. Is that a myth? Yeah. People that talk about it do it, and people that don't talk about it also do it. And we talked about did we talk about risk factors yet?
I think they're right here. You could talk about them.
No, go ahead. You can read those, and then I'll just add one. I want to just add one here.
Okay, so individual risk factors, previous suicide attempt. So I'm always asking my patients, have you ever tried to take your own life? If they tell me yes, then I know they've gone a step farther than they would have if they just would have had the thoughts. Right, and then mental illness, depression, social isolation, criminal or legal problems, money problems. That's a big one. Bill collectors calling, losing your house, losing your job, losing your car. Impulsiveness or aggressive tendencies. This is where I have a few patients I keep my eye on really closely because they have ADHD. So they do something and they're not thinking before they do it when it could already happen. And so I really get nervous about patients that are, and that's a problem with kids. You know, how many of our children, they impulsively do something, so that's definitely one that is big for me to watch. Serious illness, a terminal illness, substance use disorder. There are patients that often will be under the influence of a substance, and then they want to, take their own life. Relationship risk factors, adverse childhood experiences, we talked about that, traumas. Bullying, wow, that's really sad. How many young kids take their own life because they've been bullied? Social media, family history of suicide. Relationship problems, breakup with, your spouse, violence or loss. And then sexual violence is another one in terms of the relationship risk factors. Community risk factors, barriers to health care. Thankfully, we don't have that. However, it is very difficult to get into mental health services everywhere across the country. And this area, they try their best, but there aren't even enough people to help, I think, at this point. Cultural or religious belief that such a belief that suicide is a noble resolution to a personal problem. And then there are times where there's suicide clusters in communities. And then lastly, societal risk factors. The stigma associated with mental illness or help seeking. Easy access to lethal means. That's where, veteran population and law enforcement, I think you can probably speak to that. Firearms. So lethal means is not just firearms, it's medication. So I know for us, if we have a patient who's suicidal, they're only getting 7 days supply at a time, and that is it, and don't ask for any more. Especially if they tell me I tried to overdose before. Okay, well, we got a problem. And then the one thing that's really, really important here, and we may talk about this, is I asked a patient recently, can I call your spouse? Can I talk to your spouse? And I said to them, do not leave them alone. And that's the one thing you don't want to do if you know someone has suicidal thoughts. Do not leave them alone. Be with them, and do what you have to do to keep them alive. And that's a lot of pressure, so reach out for help as well. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, the other risk factor I want to talk about, because I think probably many of you have someone in your friend or family group, but that people that identify as LGBTQIA, they identify as gay, the homosexual, have a much higher risk of suicide. There's been studies delving into why, but many times it is, feeling, just all the feelings that they have, depression and anxiety about how their family's reacting to them, or, if they've come out as gay, how hard that is for them. They have depression, they have anxiety, and also possibly bullying, things like that. But just be aware of that. So if you have someone that you know in your family that does identify that way, if they are depressed, they could be at higher risk too. So it's just something to always keep your mind on as well. So yeah, Terry.
I would just like to say that as parents and grandparents, we need to be monitoring what's happening on our children's social pages. Because Dan's niece tried to kill herself twice, and on her social media they found out later that there were girls in her school that were bullying her and telling her that she should just do it. So don't be afraid to monitor your kids' social media.
The bullying is a huge thing, and if you've seen some, I'm sure, very famous, news reports about that kind of thing, where they found out that, the bullies were saying, you should just kill yourself, and that kind of thing. So it's not uncommon, and unfortunately, it's a really sad commentary on our society.
Yeah. Also, regarding the medications, like with Michelle, she works with the VA, and they get their meds pretty easily through the VA. A lot of people can't afford a copay for every 7 days, but you can encourage them and their family, somebody else, to take control of the medications and only give them their daily meds.
That's a really good point. And that also, I want to just kind of mention in terms of what you could do, or what we ask my patients to do, especially the veterans. They're not about to get rid of their weapons because they are military through and through. Never, I'm not even allowed to ask about their weapons. They say that's none of your business.
Cindy is nodding, yes.
Yeah. So I do. I have asked patients, please separate your weapons.
Also, if you do have a family member that starts on an SSRI, it is not uncommon about 10 to 14 days in for them to begin to feel and have suicidal ideations. It is always a good idea for the first month for somebody else to have control of those pills.
Yeah, that's very important, and sometimes if you're familiar at all with antidepressants, they take 4 to 6, maybe even up to 8 weeks to really kick in well. It takes quite a while. It's not like you're going to feel better in 3 days, which is very hard for patients that want to feel better quickly. But one thing the medications do pretty quickly is give them more energy. Sometimes they're what we call activating. And if somebody has had that big fatigue and not been able to do anything, but all of a sudden they've got some active, they're able to get up and move around, then sometimes they have the energy to carry out their suicide plan. Right. So that's exactly right. That's kind of a time when we really need to monitor too.
So I want to add then, patients under the age of 25 that start SSRIs, there's a black box warning, because if they didn't have suicidal thoughts before they started taking the medication, they may start to develop those thoughts. So that's something we always tell them as well, especially in that population with that type of medication.
To report those thoughts, for sure.
Right, and stop the medicine and notify your provider. Warning signs. Do you want to go over those, Patty?
Yeah, interesting enough, if you want to know a couple other quick statistics. Most men end their life by suicide using guns, and most women end their life by suicide using overdoses of medication. So interesting. And I guess if we think about that as probably, it kind of makes sense what we know about, female tendencies and male tendencies.
Except female
veterans.
Yes,
women
female
in the military,
veterans,
it's a
and
gun.
law enforcement.
It's weapons, right? So some warning signs. Somebody now these could be for you if you've ever felt this way, or it could be friends, family members, talking about wanting to die. Be very open about wanting to die or to take their own life. Talking about ways or looking for ways to kill themselves, like searching online. You see an online search. Maybe even buying a gun when you know they've been depressed or that type of a thing. Talking about feeling hopeless. There's really no reason to go on. Why should I even go on? Things like that. Talking about being trapped or having unbearable pain. Being a burden to their families. That's a big one. Increasing the use of drugs and alcohol is another sign. Acting anxious or agitated, taking risk-taking behaviors, acting very risky, and that can be with someone who's addicted to drugs. The risk-taking behavior usually is just increasing the amounts, regardless of what might happen to them. Sleeping too much or too little. This is kind of some signs of depression too. Isolating themselves, withdrawing. They don't any longer want to be with family. They stop doing the things that they want to do. Showing anger or rage, talking about seeking revenge, and extreme mood swings. So definitely warning signs. If you already know that one of your family members has depression, you're going to be hopefully looking out for this. I don't know if you know this, but suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. So it's a big problem in our society. Veterans, like you said, twice as likely. And since COVID started, suicides in the general population are up 30%. So it is getting to be more and more and more of a problem. So don't ever think, oh, that couldn't happen in my family. Oh, my son wouldn't do that. Oh, my spouse would never think that way. You have to be willing kind of to ask the hard questions of your family if you feel something's wrong. You see someone isolating, they seem sad, they're exhibiting any of these warning signs. It's hard sometimes to say to someone, are you having thoughts of wanting to kill yourself? But that is what we have to do. It's a hard question, and we're going to talk about, kind of what we can do. But another thing I wanted to mention is you might have known someone or had someone take their life by suicide that you saw not one single warning sign.
Right.
That's what the frustration is, I think, for so many people. Their loved ones did do this act, and they're thinking, they weren't depressed, Michelle. They hadn't said any of these things. They didn't have any warning signs. And it's a horrible, devastating thing for the family. And unfortunately, you might never know. If it was just a moment of impulsive, like we said, if it was depression, their brain isn't, they're rewired differently and they're not thinking clearly, you might never know. And that's a very hard thing for families. And that's why I want to talk about families. What happens to a family when this happens within a family? It can tear people apart. It can cause a lot of symptoms. So this is what we really wanted to make sure that you guys really knew, how to help someone and get that help, which we'll end up with, I think. But also then talk about what does the family need after this happens. And all research studies have shown that families need counseling. They need an objective person to go talk to about this. Many families feel, I think you mentioned it, guilt. Did I not do something? Was it something I said? Could I have done more? Did I not see something that was there? And that guilt can eat people up. The statistic that really blew my mind was someone in a family member, especially close family member, that killed themselves, they have, within the next year after the suicide, an 80% higher risk factor of becoming or being diagnosed with major depression because their family member took their life by suicide. That's a huge deal. Also, another statistic that is not happy or fun is that that family, the people in the family members that were closest to the person who committed or completed suicide, have a 5 times greater suicide risk in the next couple of years themselves. That's huge. So what does that mean? They need help. They need help to process this. They really need counseling. You can't stress this enough to them. Many people are resistant, but I think we say, this is for the good of you and the rest of your family. You want to come out of this healthier if you can, being able to deal with it. People who have had great loss, and I always talk to Michelle about this because when they lost their little girl, I know that they went through a lot of these things, and we always say to people, grief has no timeline. You don't get over it. You get through it and you carry it. You carry it with you. It never goes away. And that in itself can be depressing and can cause thoughts of, like you said, I'd rather not be alive to have to deal with this horrible pain. So I can't stress enough, if you know a family, if you are a family of someone who has ended their life by suicide, you need help. You need some counseling. Go talk to someone. Get in a support group. There are support groups for that where you can talk to other family members. And again, it's that feeling of you're not alone. I think Linda mentioned that. It's called universality. I'm not alone with this problem. Look, 3 other people I know have this, and we can talk about it. And, well, what helped you? Well, here's what helped me. So those things are just so, so important. So we just really want to stress that part, I think.
Right. I did want to add to the warning signs. I mean, honestly, when you know someone and they're acting differently, you kind of, you've got to think what's going on. One of the things that we have noticed warning signs is that, and Patty, you know this too, people give away possessions. I'm going to give away something that's really important to me. And then talk about it, just talk. Whatever you do, just bring up the conversation. And then, so one of the things I do with patients, and you can do this with family members, and it doesn't always mean that they're not going to take their own life, is what do you got coming up in the future? Now, Patty said you always have to have something planned. I ask every patient every time, tell me what you've got planned to do today or tomorrow, or what's coming up. What's coming up for you? Because some people don't think beyond today. They don't think beyond tomorrow because they don't plan on being here, right? So that's a futuristic thinking. That's one of the things that we look at when we look at patients who we're suspecting they want to take their own life. So one thing I did want to say, Patty knows a lot about this because she worked in patient psych. But there are times that I have a patient who is suicidal and I have to pink slip them. The ironic thing is it's not a pink slip, it's white.
It's white.
But I will have them taken to the hospital, and they will need to be there. Well, they'll need to be evaluated by the physician in the emergency room. Yeah, 72-hour hold. If it's a weekend, though, you don't want to do it on a Friday because you got to stay till Monday.
That's right.
But so if you tell, the police can do it as well. If you're in a situation at your home, family member, you can call the police and they will come. If you have someone who is suicidal or homicidal or is just not right and there's a crisis situation, they may be able to, the police may go ahead and pink slip them to the emergency room. Right, she's right. I've seen them not take them when I think they should, and then I say, no, go back and pick them up because I put a pink slip in. Right. Is this community, the NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, they have some trainings with our local law enforcement called CIT trainings. I'm actually going to try to attend the one in November because they have mental health professionals work with the police so that they know what is happening here, what should I do, what shouldn't I do. But if I tell the police, you will take this patient to the emergency room, they have to take them. Do it, And so they will. So if you get stuck, you can call, the police, and then they will usually help you.
And that's a hard thing. Can any of you guys imagine calling 911 because a close family member is threatening to end their life and they're saying, you better not call it, we'll hate you forever, I don't do this, and they're angry? That's a hard thing to do.
It's harder to go to their funeral.
But
though.
exactly. You have to say, I need you alive. You're worth this to me. You are precious. You're important, and I have to get you help. The CIT training, crisis intervention training, is so really awesomely amazing. I was able to see some of that as well, training the police officers to know how to respond, and not just to suicide, but very serious mental illness such as schizophrenic patients, maybe hallucinating, or manic patients and things like that, which is really important. So this kind of here to end it, what do you do? What do you do if you have a family member that you feel has some of these symptoms, withdrawing, all these risk factors, and you have talked to them, you've asked that hard question, and they admit to you, yes, I do. I feel suicidal. I have suicidal thoughts. What do you then do? Well, it's a hard situation to be in, but the main thing is that at that moment, you know they absolutely have to get help. That is the most important thing. And like Michelle said, don't leave them alone. But you can ask them if they have a plan. You can also ask them to contract with you. This is what we do with patients on the unit. You can use the word promise. You can say, I'm going to help get you help. But you have to promise me that you will walk beside me in this journey. You're not going to try to end your life before we get help. Many people will promise, some won't. But if you're in a situation at that point where you think they could act on those suicidal plan or impulses and they will not promise you, that might be an instance where you have to call someone. You have to call the police and say, I am so scared they won't contract with me, they won't promise, and they're threatening suicide. That's a very hard thing, but you're not alone. Call and call those emergency services, get the person help. If I'm right legally, the pink slip just is that they have to get to the ER to be evaluated. And then they're evaluated in the ER by a social worker or a psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist usually makes the decision. I'm going to admit this person maybe against their will, but yes, they have to stay for the 3 days type of a thing. But I can't tell you how many people's lives have been saved because of those 3 days that they got in there and got help. So always take it seriously. You know, sometimes we use cliches. People might try to start pouring out their heart to us, and we say, oh, it'll get better, it'll be okay, you know, things. Try not to do that and really listen to someone, because if you're picking up that there's something serious here, delve into it a little farther and say, you know, I'm really concerned about you. Are you even having, you know, feelings of self-harm, like you want to hurt yourself? They might admit it, maybe they aren't, but at least you know that you're not just kind of blowing it off, because it's so important with friends and family, and this is a good way that we can hopefully prevent. But the other thing we always want to mention too is, even though we have the guilt, right? Is it ever anyone else's fault that someone took their own life? Is it ever a family member's fault or a friend? Or you really do have to unfortunately come down to saying the person did make that decision. That was their decision, and it wasn't that their brother didn't do enough, or their you know, mom didn't do enough, or whoever it was. So we have to try to help the families kind of deal with that guilt. And that comes right back to the counseling for the families and how important that is. So we have the last handout that Frank and Larry can give you guys. So this kind of covered a lot of the stuff we talked about today. So it's not just resources, but I want to point out that on the back page are resources for you if you feel overwhelmed, depressed, or suicidal, or if you have a family member or a friend. There's some resources you can just keep, kind of keep a note on where you put this. But here locally, you can see that there's a 1-419-522-HELP. That is our local mental health center. That's a crisis line. You can call that 24/7, any day of the week, holidays. They are always there to answer the phone, and they will help give you advice. They'll help get the help that you need if you're having a crisis with someone. And speaking of that mental health center, that's called Catalyst. It's on Shoal Road, which is right off 42, Lexington Avenue. That is our local mental health, our county mental health center, where you can go for counseling and support groups and treatment. And if I'm right, Michelle, I believe it's still correct that it's based on ability to pay. So don't ever let money or insurance keep you from getting help. There's definitely help no matter what. So there's some resources on there, and we'd like to add for you guys, which we forgot to put on there, if you want to just write in about NAMI, N-A-M-I, they are National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they have huge resources for people. We have a great, like she mentioned, in Richland County, they're amazing, and their number is 522-NAMI. So 522-HELP, 419 area code, 522-HELP, and 522-NAMI. They have great resources for people too. But if you are feeling that way, you can go to your own provider, be honest about how you're feeling. You can go to any local emergency room and tell them, and they will get you help. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline on that list as well, and that is an 800 number that anybody can call at any time for help if they're feeling suicidal. Anything else with that?
Patty, I'd like to give a testimony about suicide and the spiritual end and the therapy end.
Yes.
Our father committed suicide in 1996. And it was like the worst day of my life. And the next thing you're doing is you can't understand why. You know, you say, did I do this? Did I not do that? Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see that? You know, and you just get to a point where you just, you know, you wear yourself out. I wasn't so close with God as I am now. I didn't understand death, and I remember every night I'd go to bed. If it was raining, I just wanted to go over and put an umbrella over its grave, you know. So, after about a year, I walked around. I had this dark cloud hanging over me. I mean, it was hanging low. And I thought, you know what, the police department has psychologists. So I made an appointment. So I went to see him twice. The second time I came home, I got on my face down on the floor with my arms out. Let me tell you something. When you get on the floor in that prone position, things will move. Things will move in your life. About 2 weeks later, I get off work, and I was working 11 in the morning to 7 p.m. And it was kind of in the winter. It was still dark when I got off work. And I remember I got on my car. I'm walking into the house, and I look up. I could see every star in the universe. I knew then that God had taken that cloud off of me. Amen. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind, because it was bad for me, you know. And I just want you to know that when she talks about keeping God in the therapy both, I'm telling you, it'll work. But you just got to, you know, we're all embarrassed. We don't want to tell people we have problems. We don't tell people this and that,
Right.
you know. And, you know, you guys know I'm a crime scene investigator. Those are one of the calls that I investigate. And let me tell you, even to this day, they are tough.
Oh.
I can do the call as far as everything that has to be done. But when the family comes in, that I just can't handle it because I know their pain.
Right.
But I just want everybody to know that God will work. And like I said, when you get face down, I'm sure a lot of you guys can know that, on the floor, and you cry out, things will move, and it'll move
God
fast.
will be there for you.
Thank you for
so much,
sharing
Cindy.
that.
You sharing your heart like that. It is such a devastating thing to families that nobody that hasn't gone through it can really understand, can they? And you can see why the statistics are, the depression and suicide, even among the family members after the risk raises up.
And one of the things is I came to this church, you know, I've gotten to know a lot more about my Bible and things, you know. And I have been on suicide calls and never thought in my life I'd be able to do this, but I've actually prayed with the people. You know, I've actually sat there and prayed with them.
Amen.
You know?
That's awesome.
You know, and like I said, I'll walk up to them and say, I know how you feel. I've been there.
Right. You can.
And that really helps them a lot.
That is a great thing when you have
Yeah.
an experience that you can
Right.
share. It makes that connection with that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah,
Your
because I mean,
testimony's powerful.
oh
Right.
yeah. But I just want everybody to know that God is still the
Yeah.
same.
Still moving.
He's on his
You're right,
throne.
Cindy. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you shared your
Yes,
heart.
thank you. That's hard to do.
You know, there's a part of everyone, even if they're suicidal, that wants to live. We call it ambivalence. Because if somebody had no ambivalence and any desire to live, as soon as the thought came in their head, they would do it. But some people are suicidal off and on quite a long time. There's a part of them that wants to live, and that's what we always try to reach, that hope part, and let them know there's hope, you're valuable, this can change. This is not the rest of your life. This is not your permanent situation. You can feel better. You can, you can change. These thoughts can go away. You can get help. That's one of the biggest things.
My dad was the head of the house. You know, he was the head of the house, and whatever he said was final. Because we was a, American family, you know. And one of the ways that I was able to deal with what he did, being the head of the house, he made that decision. I have to respect that. I know that sounds terrible, or whatever, but that's just something that I could do.
But like we said, he was the one that made that decision.
Right,
It wasn't
right.
something that you did or
Right.
didn't do, right?
Right, right. So I just had to accept what he did because he, like I said, he always had the last word.
Yeah. I think the other thing we want to leave you with too, when we talk about faith in God and these kind of things, I'm sure that you've all heard, oh, well, if somebody kills themselves, takes their own life, they'll never be in heaven. Right? We've heard that.
I'm glad we're not the judge of that.
Amen. So what I want to say about that is, we aren't the judge. Jesus knows what was going on in their brain, their head, their struggles. He knows all that, and we don't. So he's the judge, and if they loved him, and we just can't judge those things. So just be careful when you talk to people. If you talk to people, the families of someone who has ended their life, better just to listen, cry with them, tell them, be empathetic. Empathy means you're trying to put yourself in their shoes. I can't imagine how hard this is for you, that type of a thing, because this is not an exaggeration, but on my time on the unit, I had heard, I've heard people say to them, well, it's too bad about your son because now he won't be in heaven. I mean,
Well,
you can't imagine that but what things people will say to people that are devastated, but people do. So we aren't the
to
judge.
say nothing. Silence is gold.
Yes, exactly. Just be with that person. Let them cry, hold their hand, love them. That is the best thing to do. But so hopefully, like I said, that last handout that you got kind of goes over some of the symptoms we talked about. It's got the colorful coping in that one as well, and a few other things. You can read that later at your leisure, but the last page does have those resources for you, and then just add that NAMI, 522 NAMI. And what's so great about NAMI that we didn't say is a lot of them, their resources are for families. So if you have a family member that has mental illness and they won't get help, you don't know what to do, call NAMI. They have resources. They even have what's called family-to-family classes, where you go for a few weeks to a class with them, and they'll tell you everything about how to get help and their symptoms, kind of some of the things we've talked about today. So they're an amazing, amazing community resource. So, all right. Any questions before we kind of wrap up? I know we've kept you a little bit long. Appreciate you sticking with us. We do have a little gift for you. But first of all, does anybody have anything? Cindy, I can't tell you how much that means that you shared that. Your heart is really, we don't know what people are going through, do we? It could be our next door neighbor. It could be our good friend at church, and they haven't said it. We don't know. I think you mentioned that earlier. If we only knew what people were dealing with, we just don't always know. But anything anybody else wants to say or any questions?
Can I pray with us?
Yeah.
All right. Father God, we know that you have us here for a purpose, and we ask that you show us, Lord, what we can do to help other people, and that they would know that you are the ultimate physician. You have all the answers, Lord, and we are a sinful, degraded society, and we are not well. And we just ask that you would give us strength and endurance and courage and wisdom to persevere, to help other people, and then show up on the other side, Lord, that we would enjoy heaven forever, and that we will have no more sin, no more suffering, no more sickness. We look forward to that day, Lord, and help us to just be ready and to help our families to understand the importance of doing so. And Lord, we just thank you for the gathering today and for the wisdom that you've brought us to help each other. Thank you for all you do every day, and we just praise your name, that you would be lifted up high. In Jesus' name, amen.